At my father's funeral, a strange woman sat in the front row, and what she said after the ceremony changed everything. Hi everyone! Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together, we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. I never thought I'd have to say goodbye to my father. Not really. I mean, we all know it's coming eventually, but when you're standing there in a black dress that doesn't quite fit right anymore, watching them lower the casket, it hits you like a freight train that you weren't prepared for. Death doesn't wait for you to be ready. It just comes. The funeral home smelled like lilies and wood polish. I hate lilies now. I used to think they were elegant, but now they just smell like death to me. The flowers were everywhere, white roses, chrysanthemums, and those damned lilies. People kept coming up to me, squeezing my hand, saying things like he was a good man, and he's in a better place now. I nodded and smiled weakly, because what else are you supposed to do? Scream? Tell them that no place is better than here, with me, with his family? My father, Richard Harrison, was 72 when he died. Heart attack. Quick and painless, they said, like that's supposed to make it better. He was working in his garden, of course he was, probably pruning those rose bushes he loved more than anything. Well, almost anything. He loved me more. At least that's what I always believed. I'm Jennifer. Jennifer Harrison Mitchell now, though I still think of myself as just Jennifer Harrison sometimes. I'm 45, married to Tom for 20 years, mother to 2 teenagers who couldn't quite understand why their mom was falling apart. But Grandpa was old, my son said, as if that explained everything, as if age somehow makes loss easier to swallow. Growing up, I was Daddy's girl through and through. My mother used to joke about it, though I could hear the edge in her voice sometimes. You two have your own little world, she'd say, and it was true. We did. I remember being 7 years old, sitting on his lap in his study while he worked on his accounts. He was a financial advisor, good at numbers, good at planning, good at making people feel secure about their futures. I'd play with his calculator, pressing buttons randomly, and he'd laugh and show me how to actually add things up. Numbers tell stories, Jenny, he'd say. You just have to know how to read them. Every Saturday morning was our time. He'd wake me up early, too early, my mother complained, and we'd go to the diner on 5th Street. The same booth every time, the one by the window where we could watch people walking by. He'd order coffee and wheat toast. I'd get chocolate chip pancakes, and he'd always steal a bite, pretending he wasn't supposed to. Don't tell your mother, he'd whisper, winking. She thinks I'm eating healthy. Those mornings felt sacred. We'd talk about everything and nothing. He'd tell me stories about his childhood, growing up poor in Tennessee, working in his father's hardware store, saving every penny to go to college. He was the first in his family to get a degree, and he was so proud of that. Education is freedom, Jenny, he told me more than once. Don't ever forget that. When I was 16 and my boyfriend broke up with me, Dad found me crying in my room. He didn't say anything at first, just sat down on the edge of my bed and waited. Finally, I told him everything, how stupid I felt, how much it hurt, how I thought I'd never feel normal again. He listened to every word, and then he said, You know what? He's an idiot. Any boy who doesn't see how extraordinary you are isn't worth your tears. But cry anyway. Crying means you cared, and caring is never something to be ashamed of. He was right, of course. He was always right. When I graduated from college, he was in the front row, recording everything on his old camcorder, even though half of it probably came out blurry. When I got married, he walked me down the aisle with tears in his eyes, and when he handed me over to Tom, he whispered, You take care of my girl, or you answer to me. Tom still talks about that moment, how terrified and honored he felt at the same time. My father was there when both of my kids were born. He held each of them within hours of their arrival, rocking them gently and singing old lullabies I barely remembered. "You were loved like this too," he told me once, watching me nurse my daughter, "from the moment you took your first breath." He was predictable in the best way. Sunday dinners at our house, Christmas mornings with too many presents, birthday cards that always arrived exactly on time with a check inside and a handwritten note. He came to every school play, every soccer game, every piano recital. He was the kind of father other people wished they had. And I was proud of him. God, I was so proud. He built a good life, a respectable life. He worked hard, saved money, invested wisely. He and my mother had been married for 48 years. 48 years of partnership, of inside jokes, of quiet contentment. They had their arguments, sure, but nothing major, nothing that lasted. People in our town knew him, respected him. When he walked into a room, people smiled. "There's Richard," they'd say. "Good man, that Richard." So when he died, I thought I knew exactly who we were saying goodbye to. I thought I had all the stories, all the memories, all the pieces of who he was. I thought I understood the shape of his life. I was wrong. The funeral was on a Thursday morning. We'd chosen a Thursday because the weekend felt too rushed, too crowded with other people's plans. My mother wanted it dignified and simple. "No fuss," she kept saying, though her hands shook when she said it. The church was full. I didn't realize how many people's lives he'd touched until I saw them all there, filling the pews, standing in the back when there were no more seats. His colleagues, his clients, neighbors from 3 different houses we'd lived in, people I'd never even met. I sat in the front row between my mother and Tom. My kids were next to Tom, both of them looking uncomfortable in their dress clothes. My brother sat on the other side of Mom, his face red and puffy. He'd been crying more than any of us, which surprised me. He and Dad had always been close, but in a different way, bonding over sports and fixing things around the house, not the deep conversations Dad and I shared. The service was beautiful. The pastor, who'd known Dad for 30 years, spoke about his generosity, his faith, his devotion to family. People stood up and shared stories. Old Mr. Peterson from down the street talked about how Dad had helped him navigate his retirement savings after his wife died. My cousin Michelle told a story about Dad teaching her to ride a bike when she was 8 because her own father was too impatient. I was supposed to speak too. I'd prepared something, written it out, and practiced it a dozen times. When it was my turn, I walked up to the podium on shaking legs, looked out at all those faces, and opened my mouth. Nothing came out at first. I looked down at my paper, at the words I'd so carefully chosen, and suddenly they felt all wrong. Too formal, too distant. So I folded the paper and spoke from my heart instead. "My father was my hero," I started, and my voice cracked immediately. Not because he was perfect, but because he showed up. Every single day he showed up. For me, for my mother, for everyone who needed him. He taught me that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice you make over and over again. It's staying when things get hard. It's listening when you'd rather talk. It's being present in the moments that matter and the moments that don't. I told them about our Saturday morning breakfasts, about his terrible jokes that he thought were hilarious, about how he still called me Jenny Bean, even when I was in my 40s, and found it embarrassing. I told them I didn't know how to exist in a world where he wasn't, but that I was grateful, so grateful, to have been his daughter. When I sat back down, my mother squeezed my hand. "That was perfect, honey," she whispered. "He would have loved that." The organist played Amazing Grace, and we all stood to sing, though my voice kept breaking on the high notes. I watched the casket, solid oak with brass handles, and tried to comprehend that my father was inside it, that I'd never hear his voice again, never get another one of his bear hugs, never sit across from him at that diner booth. That's when I noticed her. She was sitting in the front row on the opposite side, almost directly across from me. I'd been so focused on my own grief, on getting through my speech, that I hadn't really looked around. But now I saw her clearly, and something about her presence felt off. She was probably in her late 60s, with silver gray hair cut in a neat bob. She wore a black dress and pearls, dignified and appropriate, but there was something about her face that made me stare. She was crying, not just the polite dab your eyes with a tissue crying that most of the congregation was doing, but really crying. Her shoulders shook with it. She held a handkerchief to her face, and even from across the aisle, I could see her hands trembling. I glanced at my mother, but she was focused on the pastor, who'd moved on to the final prayer. I looked at my brother, but he had his head bowed. I looked back at the woman, and our eyes met. There was something in her gaze recognition, maybe, or regret. She looked at me like she knew me, which was impossible because I'd never seen her before in my life. I was certain of it. I'd been organizing this funeral for 3 days straight, going through Dad's address book, calling his friends and colleagues. I knew everyone who was supposed to be here. She wasn't on the list. The service ended, and everyone filed out to the cemetery for the burial. It was a cold day, gray sky threatening rain. We stood around the grave as the pastor said the final words, as they lowered the casket into the ground. I threw a rose onto the lid, and the soft thud it made felt like the most final sound I'd ever heard. People started leaving after that, heading back to our house where we'd arranged for food and drinks. My mother had insisted on hosting, said it's what Dad would have wanted. I stayed at the graveside longer than I should have, just staring at that hole in the ground, until Tom gently took my elbow. "Jenny, we should go," he said softly. I nodded and started to turn away, but that's when I saw her again, the woman from the front row. She was standing apart from the other mourners, near a large oak tree, watching me. Not the grave me specifically. "Who is that?" I asked Tom, nodding in her direction. He followed my gaze and frowned. "I don't know. Why?" "She was sitting in the front row during the service. I've never seen her before." "Maybe one of your dad's old clients?" Tom suggested. He knew a lot of people. That was true, but something about it didn't sit right with me. Clients didn't usually sit in the front row. That space was reserved for family, close friends. You had to really matter to sit there. Tom had to go to the car with the kids, and I told him I'd be right there. Instead, I walked toward the woman. She saw me coming and didn't move, just stood there under that oak tree with her hands clasped in front of her, waiting. Up close, I could see she'd been beautiful once and still was in that elegant, aging way. Her eyes were puffy and red from crying, but they were also sharp, intelligent. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, sadness, certainly, but also something else. Nervousness? Fear? "Hello," I said, and my voice came out harder than I intended. "I'm Jennifer, Richard's daughter." "I know who you are," she said quietly. Her voice was cultured, with just a hint of a southern accent. "I've known who you are for a very long time." That sent a chill down my spine. "I'm sorry, but I don't think we've met. Were you a friend of my father's?" She smiled, but it was the saddest smile I'd ever seen. "Yes, I was a friend of Richard's. My name is Catherine Winters." The name meant nothing to me. I waited for her to explain, but she just stood there, looking at me like she was trying to memorize my face. "How did you know my father?" I pressed. Catherine took a breath, and I saw her gathering courage. "We should talk," she said. "Not here, not now, with everyone around, but soon. There are things you need to know." "What things?" My heart was starting to beat faster. "What are you talking about?" "Your father was a wonderful man," she said, and fresh tears welled in her eyes. "But he wasn't who you think he was. None of us ever really know our parents, do we? We only know the version of them they show us." I felt anger flare in my chest. "How dare you? You come to his funeral. You sit in the front row like your family, and now you're standing here telling me I didn't know my own father. Who the hell are you?" "I'm someone who loved him," Catherine said, and the way she said it, the weight of those words made my blood run cold. I loved him for 35 years. The world tilted. I actually took a step back, like I'd been physically pushed. "What?" I'm sorry, she said, and she was crying openly now. I didn't want to tell you like this. I didn't want to tell you at all, but I had to come. I had to say goodbye to him. And I thought you deserved to know the truth. The truth about what? I was almost shouting now. People were starting to look over, including Tom, who'd stopped halfway to the car. What truth? Catherine reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. She held it out to me with a shaking hand. He wrote you a letter. He gave it to me years ago, made me promise that if anything happened to him, I'd give it to you. He was going to tell you himself eventually. He always said he would. But then, time kept passing, and it never seemed like the right moment. I didn't take the envelope. I couldn't. I just stared at it like it was a bomb. Your father and I met 40 years ago, Catherine continued, her voice steady now, like she'd rehearsed this, or maybe just lived with these words for so long they came out automatically. I was working as a secretary at the firm where he started his career. We became friends first. And then, more than friends. By the time we realized what was happening, it was too late. We were in love. No, I said. The word came out flat, automatic. No, that's not possible. My father loved my mother. They were married for 48 years. He did love your mother, Catherine said gently. I'm not saying he didn't. People are complicated, Jennifer. They can love more than one person. They can build more than one life. Stop. I held up my hand. My whole body was shaking. Just stop talking. I know this is hard. Hard? I laughed, and it came out slightly hysterical. You just told me my father had an affair for 35 years, and I'm supposed to, what? Thank you for the information? It wasn't just an affair, Catherine said, and something in her tone made me freeze. Jennifer, we had a life together, a real life. I have a house that he helped pay for. We took trips together every year. He told your mother they were business conferences. We celebrated holidays, anniversaries. We were partners. The ground felt unsteady beneath my feet. Did my mother know? I don't know, Catherine admitted. He never told me she did, but wives know things, don't they? Maybe she chose not to see it. Maybe she convinced herself it wasn't real. I honestly can't say. Jesus Christ. I put my hand to my head. I felt like I might throw up. Does anyone else know? My brother? His friends? I don't think so. Richard was very careful. He kept us separate. I never came to your house. You never came to mine. We existed in parallel lines that weren't supposed to meet. Until today. Until today, she agreed. I know I shouldn't have come to the funeral. I knew it was a risk. But I couldn't not say goodbye to him. I couldn't just pretend he hadn't been the center of my life for 4 decades. Do you understand? I didn't understand. I didn't understand any of this. The man she was describing, sneaking around, lying to his family, maintaining a secret relationship for 35 years, that wasn't my father. My father was honest, loyal. He taught me about integrity, for God's sake. Take the letter, Catherine said, still holding out the envelope. Read it when you're ready. Or don't read it at all, if that's what you need. But please, know that I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm just trying to honor what he wanted, which was for you to know the truth. The truth, I repeated bitterly. What is the truth exactly? That my entire childhood was a lie? That every time he said he loved my mother, he was really thinking about you? That those Saturday morning breakfasts were just him assuaging his guilt? No, Catherine said firmly. Those moments were real. His love for you was real. That's what the letter says. He wrote it to make sure you understood that none of this changes how much he loved you, and your brother and your mother. You were his world, Jennifer. But I was part of his world too, a part he couldn't walk away from. I finally took the envelope, more to make her stop talking than anything else. It was thick, multiple pages inside. My name was written on the front in my father's handwriting, that familiar scrawl I'd seen on birthday cards and grocery lists and checks tucked into Christmas cards. Is there anything else? I asked. my voice cold. Any other bombshells you'd like to drop at my father's funeral? Catherine hesitated, and my stomach dropped. Oh God, there was more. We have a daughter, she said quietly. The envelope fell from my hand. I watched it tumble to the grass in slow motion, like everything was suddenly happening underwater. What? Her name is Sarah. She's 33 years old. She lives in Portland now, working as a graphic designer. She's smart and funny and kind, and she looks like Richard around the eyes. Catherine's voice was soft, almost dreamlike, like she was talking about something precious and fragile. She knows about you. She's always known about you and your brother and your mother. Richard insisted on that. He didn't want her growing up with lies about who she was. I couldn't breathe. Literally couldn't catch my breath. There were spots dancing in my vision. Jennifer? Tom was suddenly beside me, his hand on my elbow. Jesus, you're white as a sheet. What's going on? Who is this woman? I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. How do you say it? How do you tell your husband that everything you thought you knew about your family is a lie? Catherine looked at Tom, then back at me. I should go. You have my number. It's in the letter, along with Sarah's, if you ever want to talk. I know this is impossible to process right now, but someday, maybe. She trailed off, realizing how ridiculous that sounded. Someday, maybe what? We'd all have coffee and laugh about this? She walked away, back toward the parking lot. I watched her go, this stranger who'd just blown up my entire life, and I couldn't move. Couldn't think. Jenny. Tom's voice was urgent now. Talk to me. What did she say? I bent down and picked up the envelope. The paper felt heavy, weighted with secrets. She said my father had another family. The words hung in the air between us. Tom's face went through several expressions. Confusion, disbelief, shock. What? That can't be right. She has a daughter, my father's daughter, which means I have a sister I never knew about. Jenny, that's insane. Are you sure she wasn't just some crazy person? Maybe she's confused or lying or... She had a letter, I said, holding up the envelope. From him, in his handwriting. She knew things, Tom. She knew me. She wasn't confused. My mother was walking toward us now, my brother next to her, both of them looking concerned. They'd seen the encounter, seen me nearly collapse. Jennifer, honey, what's wrong? Mom asked. Who was that woman? I looked at my mother, this woman who'd been married to my father for 48 years, who'd raised his children, who'd believed in his faithfulness, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't be the one to tell her. Not here, not now, not on the day we buried him. Just an old client of Dad's, I lied, and the words felt like ashes in my mouth. She wanted to express her condolences. Mom nodded, accepting this, and I felt like the worst person in the world. We went back to the house. People ate sandwiches and drank coffee and told stories about Dad. I moved through it all like a ghost, smiling and nodding, and saying thank you while that envelope burned in my purse like a hot coal. Tom kept glancing at me, worry etched on his face, but I couldn't talk about it. Not there. Not with 50 people in our living room, all of them praising my father's memory. It was nearly midnight before everyone left, and the house finally fell quiet. The kids were in bed. My mother had gone home with my brother, who'd promised to stay with her for a few days. Tom and I were alone in our bedroom, and the envelope sat on the dresser between us like a third presence. Are you going to read it? Tom asked. I don't know. Maybe it explains things. Maybe there's context we don't have. What context could possibly make this okay? I snapped. What could he say that would explain having a whole other family? Another daughter? I don't know, baby. I'm just trying to help. I picked up the envelope, turned it over in my hands. For 35 years, this secret had existed. My whole adult life, and most of my childhood, my father had been living this double life. How many times had he lied to us? How many business trips were really visits to Catherine and their daughter? How many times had he looked my mother in the eye and lied? I'm going to read it, I said suddenly, before I could lose my courage. But I need to do it alone. Is that okay? Tom nodded, kissed my forehead, and left the room. I sat down on the edge of the bed and opened the envelope. 3 pages fell out, covered front and back in my father's handwriting. The date at the top was from 6 years ago. He'd written this when he was 66 years old, still healthy, probably sitting at his desk in his study while I was. What? Making dinner for my family? Driving my kids to soccer practice? Living my normal life with no idea that everything I believed was built on lies? I started to read. My dearest Jenny, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And Catherine has kept her promise to give you this letter. I wish I could be there to explain this in person, to see your face, to answer your questions, to beg for your forgiveness. But I was always a coward when it came to this, and I suppose I remain one even in death. I want to start by saying that everything you believe about my love for you is true. You have been the light of my life since the moment you were born. Every Saturday morning breakfast, every birthday, every moment we spent together, those were the realest, truest parts of who I am. Being your father has been the greatest privilege of my life. But I need you to understand the full truth of who I was, even if it changes how you remember me. I met Catherine in 1985. You were 5 years old. Your mother and I had been married for 15 years, and I thought I knew what my life was. I thought I had it all figured out. I loved your mother. I loved you and your brother. I had a good job, a nice house. I was content. And then Catherine walked into the office, and everything changed. I fought it at first. I'm not a man who ever intended to be unfaithful. I was raised to believe in commitment, in honor, in keeping your vows. But Catherine was. She was like finding a piece of myself I didn't know was missing. We could talk for hours. She understood parts of me I'd never shown anyone. With her, I could be someone I wasn't allowed to be at home. Uncertain, vulnerable, searching. I'm not making excuses. I'm just trying to help you understand how it happened. The affair began 6 months after we met. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd end it soon, that it was just a moment of weakness. But weeks became months, became years, and I couldn't let her go. By the time Sarah was born, I was living in 2 worlds, and I'd convinced myself that both could coexist. Sarah, your sister. God, Jenny, I wish you could know her. She's remarkable. She has your same stubborn streak, your same laugh. When she was little, she'd call me on Tuesday nights, that was our designated time, and tell me about her week. I couldn't tuck her in at night, or attend her school plays, or walk her down the aisle at her wedding, and that killed me. But I was there when I could be. I supported her. I loved her. I know what you're thinking. How could I love both of you? How could I split my heart like that? But the truth is, love doesn't divide, it expands. Loving Sarah never diminished how much I loved you. Loving Catherine never meant I stopped loving your mother. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I know I don't deserve that. I lied to you for your entire life. I pretended to be someone I wasn't. I let you believe in a version of me that was only partly true. But I need you to know that the love was real. All of it. The parts I showed you, the parts I hid, all of it came from a real place. I am deeply flawed, Jenny. I am weak and dishonest and selfish. But I loved you with every fiber of my being. I hope someday you might meet Sarah. She's wanted to know you for years, but I asked her to wait, to respect the boundaries I'd set. She's a good person. She's your blood. You might find that you have more in common than you think. I'm sorry I wasn't braver. I'm sorry I didn't tell you this myself, when I was alive and could face the consequences. I'm sorry for the pain this will cause you and your mother and your brother. I'm sorry for being human and complicated and flawed. But I'm not sorry for loving the people I loved. I'm not sorry for the life I built, even if it was built on deception. I'm not sorry for Sarah, or for the years I had with Catherine, or for any of it, really, except the hurt it will cause you. Please don't let this destroy your memories of me entirely. I was a good father to you, even if I was also a father to someone else. I was a loyal husband in my way, even if I betrayed my vows. People are contradictions, Jenny. We're all trying our best and failing constantly, and hoping that the love we give is enough to outweigh the damage we do. I love you, Jenny Bean. I always have. I always will. Dad, I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully, put it back in the envelope, and sat there in the silence of my bedroom, feeling nothing and everything at once. He loved me, that much was clear. But he also loved someone else, lived with someone else, created a whole other family while maintaining the facade of ours. He'd stood at my wedding and given that speech about honor. He'd sat across from me at that diner booth every Saturday and looked me in the eye while keeping this massive secret. Who was he? Really? The devoted father I'd known? The duplicitous man who'd maintained 2 families? Both? Neither? I thought about my mother, asleep at my brother's house, believing she'd had a good marriage. 48 years. She deserved to keep that belief, didn't she? What good would it do to tell her now, when he was already gone and she couldn't even confront him about it? But then again, didn't she deserve to know the truth about the man she'd spent her life with? I thought about my brother, who'd idolized Dad in his own way. How would this change things for him? And Sarah, this sister I'd never met, who'd grown up knowing about me while I'd been oblivious to her existence. What was that like for her? Knowing your father had another family, a real family, while you were the secret? I must have sat there for an hour before Tom came back in. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay?" "No," I said honestly. "I'm really not." He sat down next to me and put his arm around my shoulders. "What did the letter say?" I told him, all of it. About Catherine, about Sarah, about the 35 years of double life. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he just sat there quietly for a moment. "Jesus," he finally said. I don't even know what to say." "Neither do I." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know that either." But even as I said it, I knew I was lying. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I just wasn't ready to admit it yet. The next morning, I called the number in the letter. Catherine answered on the second ring, like she'd been waiting. "Jennifer," she said, and I could hear relief in her voice. "I'm so glad you called." "I read the letter," I said, my voice flat. "I need to meet Sarah." There was a pause. "Are you sure? There's no rush. You can take your time to—" "I need to meet her," I repeated firmly, "as soon as possible." We arranged it for 3 days later, at a coffee shop halfway between our houses. Neutral territory. Catherine offered to be there, but I said no. This needed to be just me and Sarah, at least at first. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell my brother. I told Tom, and he asked if I wanted him to come with me, but I said no to that too. This was something I needed to do alone. The coffee shop was in a neighborhood I'd never been to before, which somehow felt appropriate. Everything was unfamiliar now, so why not the setting too? I got there 15 minutes early and ordered a coffee I didn't drink. I sat at a corner table where I could watch the door, and I waited. She arrived exactly on time. I knew it was her immediately, not because she looked like Dad, though Catherine was right about the eyes, but because she looked as terrified as I felt. Sarah Winters was tall and thin, with dark hair cut short and a nervous energy about her. She wore jeans and a green sweater, and she clutched her purse like it was a shield. She scanned the coffee shop, and when her eyes found mine, she froze. We just looked at each other for a long moment. I tried to find my father in her face. The eyes? Yes, those were definitely his. The shape of her nose, maybe. The way she stood with her weight on one hip, that was familiar too. She walked over slowly, like she was approaching a wild animal that might bolt. "Jennifer," she said, and her voice was soft, uncertain. "Sarah," I replied and gestured to the empty chair. "Sit down." She sat, arranged her purse on her lap, folded her hands on top of it. Up close, I could see she'd been crying. Her eyes were red and puffy. "Thank you for meeting me," she said. "I know this must be incredibly difficult." "Difficult," I repeated, and laughed humorlessly. That's one word for it. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I didn't mean, I know you're dealing with a lot right now. Did you know? I asked abruptly. Did you know he died before the funeral? She nodded. Mom called me that night. The night of his heart attack. I wanted to come, but she said it was too risky. She said you and your family didn't know about us, and showing up would just cause problems. So you stayed away? I stayed away, she confirmed. But it killed me. He was my father too, you know. I wanted to say goodbye. I wanted to be there. There was an accusation in her voice, subtle but there. Like this was my fault somehow, that she'd been excluded from his funeral. Like I was the one who'd set up this mess. I didn't know you existed, I said, and my voice came out sharper than I intended. I'm sorry if that inconvenienced you, but I was at my father's funeral, mourning him, thinking I knew who he was. And then your mother showed up and told me my entire life was a lie. So forgive me if I'm not more sympathetic to your situation. Sarah's face crumpled. I'm not trying to make this about me. I've wanted to meet you for so long. Since I was a kid. I used to imagine what you were like, what it would be like if we could be sisters for real, instead of just whatever this is. What is this? I asked. We're strangers who happen to share DNA. We're more than that, Sarah insisted. We're both his daughters. We both loved him. Doesn't that count for something? I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know what any of this counts for. We sat in silence for a moment. The coffee shop hummed with other people's conversations, their normal lives continuing while mine had fractured into pieces I didn't know how to put back together. Tell me about him, I said finally. Tell me about your version of him. Sarah looked surprised, then cautiously hopeful. What do you want to know? Everything. What was he like with you? What did you call him? Was he a good father to you? She took a breath, and I could see her organizing her thoughts. I called him Dad, but only when we were alone. When I was little, if we were out somewhere, I had to call him Richard. Mom said it was safer that way, that people wouldn't ask questions. That detail hit me harder than I expected. This child, having to hide who her father was in public, never being able to claim him openly. He came to visit every other weekend, Sarah continued. Told your family he was doing consulting work in different cities. He'd stay at Mom's place, and we'd do normal father-daughter things, go to the park, watch movies, cook dinner together. He taught me to ride a bike in the parking lot behind Mom's apartment building at 6 a.m, so no one would see us. I felt tears prickling at my eyes. He taught me to ride a bike too, in our driveway, in the middle of the afternoon, with half the neighborhood watching. I know, Sarah said quietly. He told me that story. He told me lots of stories about you. He talked about me? I don't know why that surprised me, but it did. All the time, you and your brother, he was so proud of you. He showed me pictures, school photos, your wedding, your kids. He'd tell me about your Saturday breakfasts, about how smart you were, how kind. Sometimes I think he talked about you to remind himself why he couldn't leave. You were the reason he stayed. Don't, I said sharply. Don't put that on me. His choices were his own. You're right, I'm sorry. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, even though she hadn't taken a sip. I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. I'm just trying to explain what it was like. Growing up knowing I had a sister, but not being allowed to know her. Wondering if you'd hate me if you ever found out. Watching him leave every other Sunday night to go back to his real family. We weren't more real than you, I said, though the words felt strange. We were just visible. Maybe that's the same thing. We fell silent again. I studied her face, this woman who was my sister, trying to reconcile the existence of her with everything I thought I knew. She had his eyes, but she had her mother's mouth, her mother's hands. She was a stranger and family at the same time. Did he ever talk about leaving my mother? I asked. About making your family the public one? Sarah shook her head. Never. He was clear from the beginning that he wouldn't leave your mom. Mom accepted that. She said she'd rather have part of him than none of him. That's sad, I said. She deserved better than that. We all did, Sarah replied, and there was an edge to her voice now. Your mom deserved honesty. You and your brother deserved to know the truth. I deserved to have a father I didn't have to hide, and Mom deserved a man who could choose her fully. But we don't always get what we deserve, do we? No, I agreed. We don't. He left me money, Sarah said suddenly, changing direction. In his will. He has a separate trust set up for me. Mom told me about it after he died. Did you know about that? I shook my head, feeling another shockwave roll through me. I haven't seen his will yet. The lawyer is meeting with us next week. I'm not taking it, Sarah said. The money, I don't want it. It feels like blood money or something, like he's trying to buy my silence or assuage his guilt from beyond the grave. That's between you and your mother, I said. I'm not going to tell you what to do with it. Would it bother you if I took it? I thought about that. Would it? Would I feel like she was stealing from my inheritance, from my children's inheritance? Or would I feel like she deserved it, compensation for growing up in the shadows? I honestly don't know, I admitted. Right now, I can't think about money. I'm still trying to process that you exist. Fair enough. She smiled slightly, sadly. Can I ask you something? Are you going to tell your mom and your brother? That was the question, wasn't it? The one I'd been avoiding since that woman, Catherine, Sarah's mother, had appeared at the funeral. I don't know, I said. Part of me thinks they deserve to know the truth, but another part thinks, what's the point? He's gone. Telling them now just causes pain, without any possibility of resolution. They can't confront him. They can't get answers. They just have to live with the knowledge that the person they loved wasn't who they thought he was. That's what you have to do now, Sarah pointed out. Yes, and it's horrible. So why would I inflict that on them? Because secrets are toxic, Sarah said. I grew up swimming in secrets, and I can tell you they poison everything. Even when you think you're protecting people, you're really just building a house on a foundation of lies. Eventually, it collapses. You sound like you've thought about this a lot. I have. My whole life, basically. Being the secret child gives you a lot of time to think about the nature of truth and deception. I found myself almost smiling despite everything. There was something about her directness, her willingness to say hard things, that reminded me of myself. Tell me about your life, I said. Not about Dad, about you. What's it like being a graphic designer in Portland? Her face brightened, and for the next hour, we talked. Really talked. She told me about her job at a small agency, about the terrible apartment she shared with 2 roommates, about the guy she'd been dating who turned out to be a commitment phobe. I told her about my kids, about Tom, about my work as a part-time bookkeeper. It was strange and uncomfortable, and also oddly natural. We had the same sense of humor, dry and a little dark. We both talked with our hands. We both ordered coffee, but barely drank it. We were sisters in ways that had nothing to do with choice and everything to do with biology and shared paternity. When we finally stood up to leave, I found myself not wanting to say goodbye. Not yet. Can we do this again? Sarah asked, voicing what I was thinking. I know this is weird and complicated, but I'd like to know you, if you'll let me. I looked at her. This woman who represented everything wrong with my father's choices, but who wasn't responsible for any of it. She hadn't asked to be born into this mess any more than I'd asked to discover it. Yeah, I said, we can do this again. She smiled, and it transformed her face, made her look younger and more hopeful. Thank you, Jennifer, really. Jenny, I corrected. My friends call me Jenny. Jenny, she repeated, testing it out. I like that. We exchanged phone numbers, real ones this time, not just numbers and letters. As we walked out of the coffee shop together, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness. I wasn't ready for that yet, might never be ready. But maybe acceptance. maybe the beginning of understanding. The next week, I had to deal with the will. My mother, my brother, Tom, and I sat in the lawyer's office while he read through the document. Most of it was predictable. The house went to Mom. The savings were split between her, me, and my brother. Various smaller bequests to charities and friends. Then the lawyer paused, cleared his throat uncomfortably, and said, "There's also a trust fund established for a Sarah Catherine Winters. The sum of $250,000, to be distributed to her in quarterly installments over 5 years." My brother's head snapped up. "Who the hell is Sarah Catherine Winters?" I looked at my mother. Her face had gone very still, very pale. And in that moment, I knew. She'd known. Maybe not all the details. Maybe she'd never met Catherine or Sarah. But she'd known something. The way she sat there, perfectly composed, not asking questions, she'd known. "Richard had another family," the lawyer said carefully. "He asked me to include this provision in his will and to inform you of it after his passing." "Another family?" My brother's voice rose. "What does that mean, another family?" "It means exactly what it sounds like," I said, and my voice came out harder than I intended. "Dad had a daughter with another woman. Her name is Sarah. She's 33 years old. He supported her for her entire life." My brother turned to Mom. "Did you know about this?" She didn't answer right away. She sat there in her black dress, her hands folded in her lap, staring at some point on the wall behind the lawyer's head. "Mom," my brother pressed, "did you know?" "I suspected," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For years, I suspected. The late nights, the weekend trips, the money that seemed to disappear. But I never asked. I never confirmed it." "Why not?" I asked, and I couldn't keep the betrayal out of my voice. "Why didn't you say something?" She looked at me then, and her eyes were full of a sadness so deep it made my chest hurt. "Because I didn't want to know. Because if I knew for certain, I'd have to do something about it. I'd have to leave or confront him or blow up our life. And I didn't want to do any of those things, so I chose not to know." "That's insane," my brother said. "That's absolutely insane, Mom." "Maybe it is," she agreed. "But it was my choice. I chose to stay. I chose to preserve what we had, even if it wasn't everything I thought it was. And I'm not apologizing for that choice." "He made fools of us," my brother said bitterly. "All of us. He stood there and preached about honesty and integrity while he was lying to our faces every single day." "He was human," Mom said quietly. "Flawed and complicated and human. He loved us. That was real. Just because he also loved someone else doesn't erase what we had." "Doesn't it?" my brother challenged. "Doesn't it change everything?" "Only if we let it," Mom said. I sat there listening to them argue, feeling like I was watching from a distance. Part of me agreed with my brother. How could we ever trust our memories now? How could we look back on our childhood and not wonder what was real and what was performance? But another part of me understood what my mother was saying. Love is complicated. People are complicated. We're all capable of holding contradictory truths at once loving someone and betraying them, being devoted and being dishonest, building beautiful things on foundations of lies. "I met her," I said suddenly, and both of them turned to look at me. "Sarah, I met her last week." "You what?" my brother asked. "I met my sister. We had coffee. We talked." "Jesus Christ, Jennifer." My brother ran his hands through his hair. "Why would you do that?" "Because she's my sister," I said. "Because none of this is her fault. Because Dad wanted me to know her, and maybe he was right about that." "So what now?" my brother asked. "We're just supposed to accept that Dad had this whole secret life and pretend everything's fine?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't know what we're supposed to do, but I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to get to know Sarah. I'm going to try to understand who Dad really was, not just the version of him we saw. And then, I don't know, maybe I'll forgive him, maybe I won't, but I'm not going to pretend she doesn't exist." My brother looked at me like I'd lost my mind. but my mother nodded slowly, something like approval in her eyes. The lawyer cleared his throat again. There's also a letter for the family. Richard left it with me to be read after the will. Of course he did, my brother muttered. The lawyer pulled out another envelope. God, how many letters had Dad written? And began to read. To my family, he started. I know by now you've learned about Sarah and Catherine. I know you're angry, confused, hurt. You have every right to be. I made choices that were selfish and cowardly. I built a life that required constant deception. I prioritized my own desires over your right to know the truth. But I need you to understand something. Every moment I spent with you was real. Every laugh, every conversation, every expression of love that was genuine. I was never pretending with you. You were never less than my first family, even when I was failing you by having a second. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I hope, someday, you might understand that people are complex. We contain multitudes. We love imperfectly. We hurt the people we care about most, often while trying to protect them. Sarah is innocent in all of this. She didn't choose to be born into this situation. If you can find it in your hearts to know her, I think you'll find she's remarkable. She's kind and strong and creative, and she's your blood. To my wife, you were the love of my life. I know that sounds hollow now, but it's true. I failed you in the most fundamental way a husband can fail his wife, and I'm deeply, profoundly sorry. You deserved better than what I gave you. You deserved all of me, and I could only give you part. But that part was real. Our life together was real. I hope you can remember the good times without them being entirely poisoned by this revelation. To Jennifer and Mark, you were my pride and joy. Being your father was the greatest honor of my life. I'm sorry I wasn't the man you believed I was. I'm sorry I taught you about integrity while failing to live up to it myself. I hope my failures don't prevent you from being better people than I was. I love you all. I always will. Richard. When the lawyer finished, we sat in silence. My mother was crying quietly. My brother's jaw was clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. I felt numb, hollowed out. Is that everything? My brother finally asked. That's everything, the lawyer confirmed. We left the office in a daze. My brother drove Mom home without saying goodbye to me, and I knew he needed time to process, to be angry without having to perform forgiveness. I understood that. Tom was waiting for me in the parking lot. He took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. How bad? He asked. Mom knew, I said into his shoulder. Or suspected. She chose not to confront him. Jesus! And there's money, a trust fund for Sarah, $250,000. Tom pulled back to look at me. How do you feel about that? I don't know. It feels right and wrong at the same time. She should have something from him, shouldn't she? But it also feels like he's still trying to keep everyone happy from beyond the grave, still trying to maintain both families. What do you want to do? I want to rewrite history, I said. I want to go back and have a father who was exactly who I thought he was. Since I can't do that, I guess I'll settle for moving forward. Over the next few months, I saw Sarah regularly. Coffee turned into lunch, turned into dinner. She met Tom and the kids. The kids were confused at first. How could they have an aunt they'd never heard of? But they adapted quickly the way kids do. My mother met her too, eventually. I brought Sarah to Sunday dinner one week without warning anyone. My brother was there with his family, and when we walked in together, you could have heard a pin drop. But Mom stood up, walked over to Sarah, and looked at her for a long moment. Then she pulled her into a hug. You have his eyes, Mom said. Welcome to the family, dear. My brother didn't speak to Sarah that night, or the next time she came, or the time after that. But slowly, gradually, his hostility faded into cold civility, then into cautious curiosity. 6 months after the funeral, I caught them talking about graphic design, and I knew we'd turned a corner. I think about my father a lot, about who he was, and who I thought he was, and how much those two people overlapped. I go through periods of anger where I want to scream at his grave. I go through periods of sadness where I miss him so much it physically hurts. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes I go through periods of something that might almost be understanding. He was human. Deeply, thoroughly, messily human. He made terrible choices and loved imperfectly and hurt the people he cared about most. He was weak and dishonest and selfish. But he was also the man who taught me to ride a bike and showed up for every school play and helped me move into my first apartment and cried when he held his grandchildren for the first time. He was both people at once, the devoted father and the unfaithful husband, the honest advisor and the keeper of massive secrets. We're all contradictions, I guess. We're all trying our best and failing constantly and hoping the love we give is enough to outweigh the damage we do. I'm not sure I've forgiven him. I'm not sure I ever will. But I've accepted him, accepted all of him, the good and the bad. And I've accepted Sarah too, this sister I never knew I had, who's become one of my closest friends. Last month, Sarah and I went to that diner on 5th Street, the one where Dad used to take me for Saturday breakfasts. We sat in the same booth by the window and ordered chocolate chip pancakes. He would have loved this, Sarah said, stealing a bite from my plate the same way he used to. Both his daughters together. Don't talk with your mouth full, I said automatically, and then laughed. God, I sound like him. You are like him, Sarah said. The good parts, anyway. I hope so, I said. I really hope so. The truth is complicated. The truth is that my father was a good man and a bad man, that he loved us all and betrayed us all, that he built something beautiful and something rotten at the same time. The truth is that I'll never fully understand his choices, but I can acknowledge them without letting them destroy the good memories. The truth is that grief is complicated too. I grieve the father I knew and the father I didn't know. I grieve the simplicity of my old life and the certainty I used to have. But I don't grieve alone anymore. I have Sarah now, this unexpected gift from my father's complicated life. At the 1-year anniversary of his death, we all went to his grave together. Mom, my brother, me, Tom, the kids, and Sarah. We stood there in silence for a while, and then Sarah spoke. I forgive you, Dad, she said quietly, for everything. I hope you're at peace. My brother looked away, jaw tight. Mom nodded slowly. And me? I stood there thinking about forgiveness, about whether it's something you give or something that just gradually happens over time. I'm trying, I finally said to the gravestone. I'm trying to understand. That's the best I can do right now. And it was. It is. Some days are harder than others. Some days I miss him with an ache that won't quit, and other days I'm so angry I could spit. But mostly, I'm just trying to live with the complicated truth of who he was. Because people aren't simple. Love isn't simple. Family definitely isn't simple. We're all just doing our best, failing constantly, and hoping it's enough. I don't know if it was enough for my father. I don't know if the love he gave us balanced out the lies he told. But I know that he tried, in his own flawed way, to be present for all of us. And I know that, despite everything, I'm grateful for the father I had, even if he wasn't exactly who I thought he was. That strange woman who sat in the front row at my father's funeral, she changed everything, but maybe, eventually, painfully, gradually, she also gave me something. She gave me a sister. She gave me the truth. She gave me a more complete picture of who my father was, even if it was harder to look at than the simple version I'd believed in. And sometimes, truth, even complicated, painful truth, is a gift. I still go to that diner on Saturday mornings, sometimes alone, sometimes with Tom, sometimes with Sarah. I always order chocolate chip pancakes. I always steal a bite of toast from whoever I'm with. And I always think about my father, sitting across from me in that booth, teaching me that numbers tell stories. He was right about that, at least. Numbers do tell stories. So do secrets. So do lies. So do the complicated truths we discover too late. My father's story is over now. But mine continues, and now it includes Sarah. It includes acknowledging that the people we love aren't always who we think they are. It includes accepting that you can love someone and still be angry at them. It includes understanding that forgiveness is a process, not a destination. Some mornings, I wake up and I've forgotten he's gone. I reach for my phone to call him before I remember. Those moments are the hardest. But then I think about Sarah, about how meeting her has enriched my life in ways I never expected. I think about how my kids now have another aunt, how my family has expanded in this strange, painful, beautiful way. And I think that maybe there was a reason for all of it. Not a good reason, not one that excuses anything, but a reason nonetheless. Life is long and short at the same time. People are good and bad at once. Love is infinite and insufficient. These are the truths I'm learning to live with. My father's funeral was supposed to be an ending. Instead, that strange woman in the front row turned it into a beginning of understanding, of relationships, of a more complicated and therefore more honest way of seeing the world. I don't have it all figured out. I probably never will. But I'm here, I'm trying, and I'm surrounded by family, both the family I always knew and the family I never knew existed. And somehow, impossibly, that's enough.